welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers.
And this is the podcast where every week we review a random weekly TV show from any territory, anytime. This is season 2 for you. We're just parachuting in and reviewing a show at random.
Yes, exactly. As the name implies, and this season is more random than ever, if that's possible. As you said, it is weekly TV. It could be from any wrestling company, territory, country that we could find. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of hours of pro wrestling weekly TV that has been dumped into the randomizer. We push a button, the randomizer picks a show, and we watch it. It's pretty wild to think that we're fairly deep into season 2 now, and this is the first time we'll have reviewed an episode of Monday Night Raw.
That's right. We've had SmackDown already this season. This is the first time we've had Raw.
We've also had Raw's predecessor, Primetime Wrestling.
That's right. I'll get into that lineage here in a minute, but first I want to remind everyone that you can support the show via our Patreon. We have a patreon.com/wrestling-at-random site where you can go support the show and get bonus content. So not only do we have all of the evergreen episodes of season 1, if you haven't heard us review major pay-per-view events, major events from all different territories. If you haven't gone back and listened to season 1, good news. You didn't miss out. It's still new to you. It's fresh to you. Season 1
it's free.
And it's
all
free.
Still free.
That's right. So you can go back and listen to season 1. If you've listened to everything and you're like, wow, I want more content. Good news, that Patreon that I mentioned has a tier where we are offering bonus content. So things that the randomizer pulls that we just can't find a home for, perfect for bonus content on the Patreon. Now, there's multiple tiers. So the first tier will give you access to that bonus content. The next tier up, it lets you, as you like to say, Adam, it lets you be the randomizer. You get to executive produce the show.
Yes, exactly. You can tell us what to watch. That's already happened several times. You can check out the Patreon feed if you want to know more about what shows people chose for us to watch. But yeah, if you like us and you want to give us something really good, an all-time great show, or just some quirky show that has a great match that you think is, hasn't been talked about, you want us to shine a spotlight on it, we'll do that. If you want us to watch something truly awful, if you want to subject us to that and see what we have to say, see if we survive watching and recording a podcast about it, well, if you pay us, we'll do it.
That's right. It's all available there. And we also have a tier where you can get a t-shirt as well. And any tier you select, you can always do that for 1 month, get a bonus, be able to request a show, get yourself a t-shirt. And then the next month, you can always downgrade back to just the bonus content tier and continue to get those episodes every Thursday.
I just want to jump in. The t-shirt, it's important to note that it is the rarest of the rare in pro wrestling merchandise. It is a t-shirt that you actually wouldn't be embarrassed to wear in public. A wrestling shirt you can wear outside of a wrestling arena. Just imagine that.
Dare I say tasteful? Yes.
Yes.
So you can see all of that at patreon.com/wrestling-at-random. And, of course, interact with the show. We love to hear about it, even when you're going back and watching those old episodes that we've already recorded. We want to hear about your experiences, what you love about the show. Interact with us via Twitter at WrestleAtRandom. Same for Instagram. Or you can email the show, wrestlingatrandom@gmail.com. All of those links, the entire back catalog, like I mentioned, is available at wrestlingatrandom.com. Now,
yeah, and also just want to throw in there, don't forget to subscribe. If you listen to this show, the free feed, but you have not subscribed, make sure to subscribe. Or if you're listening, on something like Spotify, tap follow. That helps the show get out there. In addition to making sure that you get to hear every episode, that helps work the algorithm, as you like to say, Jeremy, and get the show out there to more people.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Primetime Wrestling. We reviewed Primetime Wrestling earlier here in Season 2. If you haven't listened, go back and listen to that episode. January 1st, 1985 was Primetime Wrestling's debut on the USA Network. And Primetime Wrestling aired its final episode on January 4th, 1993. Now, in its Monday night time slot, WWF Monday Night Raw debuted the next week, January 11th, 1993. On June 28th, the year 2000, Viacom purchased the rights for WWF programming and moved Raw from the USA Network to what was formerly known as the Nashville Network, now branded TNN.
Yes, the National Network they tried to call it. I don't remember if they actually went through with a full rebrand of calling it that, but I do remember it being referred to as that on WWF programming a few times.
Yeah, the first episode of Monday Night Raw aired on TNN on September 25th, 2000. The episode we will review today is from just a couple months later, December 18th, the year 2000.
1 week before Christmas.
That's right, at the end of the year 2000. Okay, so we're running up here on closing out the year 2000 in wrestling. The WWF was the only certain thing in the wrestling business. WCW's future was in the air as they were looking for a buyer, and ECW was in trouble, in desperate need of a television deal. Both companies would be out of business in 2001.
Well, and ECW had lost their deal on TNN, and that was a big part of why they weren't able to find another deal, because TNN obviously didn't want them with WWF there, and then the USA Network didn't want to pick up a quote-unquote second-rate wrestling company if they couldn't have the WWF. They didn't want pro wrestling at all.
The show opens with a graphic that just says, bombshell. We get a recap from SmackDown where Vince McMahon screams at Linda McMahon, "I want a divorce."
He says, "Get out of my life." Stephanie McMahon begs him to reconsider. Vince scowls, yells, sort of spits the words out to her that your mom loves the money, the luxury, the cars, the good life. And then he says, "I look at you and I see your mother. Too unspoiled, ungrateful, little rich," and you can fill in the rest.
Yes, Stephanie's sobbing. Vince yells at Stephanie, "Get out of my life and stay out." In the back, same show, same recap still. In the back, Vince gets an emergency phone call from his son, Shane McMahon. He's told that Linda was rushed to the hospital. Vince, looking down in front of the mirror, concerned about Linda. Nope. He slowly raises his head up, looks at his reflection in the mirror, and gives a sinister smile and a laugh as we fade into the intro for Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, this is as soap opera level as it sounds. And this is sort of, I had not gone back and watched WWF 2000 in quite a while, and not watched an old episode of Raw in quite a while. And I quickly realized the type of wrestling program that we were in for here. And after the huge pyro open and approximately 1 billion signs,
oh my gosh, right?
We're welcomed by the announcers to Greenville, South Carolina. And I immediately think, wow, this must have been before the edict where, like, if it wasn't a major city, they just wouldn't say what city they were in because Vince thought it would make them look too small time. But we're kind of on the road to that because while they say Greenville on commentary, the graphic just says South Carolina.
Yes, it did. This was a legit sellout. 11,596 fans paying $427,731.
Well, there were also apparently 11,496 fans at WWF New York.
WWF New York was hopping.
They showed the inside of that place, and that was as fire hazard of a a venue as I've ever seen. It was terrifying.
And again, WWF New York was the themed restaurant in Times Square. We've recapped the history of that in previous WWF shows. Go back to our archives.
Yeah, if that's a selling point to check out the archives for you, I don't know what that says about you, but go for it. Have at it. We talk about it. Its progression from being that name to the world to not existing. I was amused as we leave the crowded confines of WWF New York. Jim Ross says, and I quote, "So many fans are waiting for a status update on Linda McMahon." I do not believe that.
Now, Vince makes his way out. He's limping. He's walking with a cane. Vince getting into the ring, he has to help his leg over the rope with the cane.
Yes, very comedic, overly dramatic.
Yes, he gets...
Basically, if you imagine that scene, Vince McMahon doing that, that's exactly what it looked like.
Vince says he's saddened and burdened.
Somewhat saddened and burdened, which I was amused by. He says, "My life hasn't been the same since last Thursday night." He recounts what happened, what we talked about earlier. He says, "I want to clear something up. I fear that my reaction was misinterpreted. I was deeply saddened over the news, but I know that's not how it came out." He says he laughed and that wasn't the appropriate response. And then he says, "I recognize that as a responsible corporate citizen." As a responsible corporate citizen. He then says, "Well, you've all done the same thing. You've had a reaction that was inappropriate. I don't want you to think I'm some sort of megalomaniac."
I don't want you to think I'm an insensitive megalomaniac.
As opposed to those sensitive megalomaniacs. Very, very complicated people.
She suffered a nervous breakdown, and Vince takes a certain amount of blame and then says the rest of the blame should go to Commissioner Mick Foley.
Which I had completely forgotten was a thing. This was like the proto version of the GM spot that we had for so many years on Monday Night Raw. But yes, Mick Foley is the commissioner. And Vince says that if he, meaning Mick Foley, hadn't pushed me over the edge at Madison Square Garden, maybe none of this would have happened.
Now, I do want to say here that there's a lot of exposition in all of this dialogue. And as someone parachuting in to the year 2000 at the end of the year at this moment, we're totally caught up on the weeks of television that have led to this moment here. So
I feel like in a lot of ways, like these episodes of Raw and SmackDown were written for time travelers more than they were written for people that were watching at the time. Because I recall watching Raw, watching SmackDown in the 2000s, and it would drive me crazy that we would get these 15, 20-minute talking segments at the beginning. It was 23 minutes here on this show, this opening segment. But watching it parachuting in, as much as this is not my type of wrestling, the extreme soap opera here, I did appreciate that if we were going there, at least we got an explanation. Vince goes on to say that some of the blame should go on his daughter, Stephanie. He says, "I would have never mentioned that my wife came from a poor background on the wrong side of the tracks, or her teenage reputation as a, quote, good time girl
in her teenage years."
Yes, or reference what happened in the backseat of that 69 Impala if it wasn't for Stephanie.
"I'm not a monster," he says. Most of the blame for the breakdown should go to Linda herself. How would he have known that she was so delicate, so weak? And JR now pipes in. This is the first time we've heard any of the commentary. JR pipes in and condescendingly says, "You've only been married 34 years. How would you have known that?"
Yes. JR was great here. Like, that's the one thing that he was very good at with whenever Vince was out there, was just total disgust at what Vince was doing in just a very real way. It came across very well. He then says that he's instructed his attorneys to temporarily stop the divorce proceedings until she gets better because he's so magnanimous. He then says, and I quote, "I am an emotional man. I have put together this walk down memory lane for you so the public can share in the way we were.
So we see some wedding photos. We see early family photos.
They're with Santa Claus.
Yes, Vince and Linda together in candid moments and posed together. And he's interrupted by Stephanie, who comes out to Triple H's horrible theme song. This is pre-Motorhead.
1, 2, is this on? Yo, Jimmy, hit me with that Triple H. Yeah, you let the music keep playing, Mr. Dumb Shit. Yo, tell me whose time it is now. Yeah, just kicking it up here. Sometime, yo, here comes trouble. Not gonna listen to anybody. Tell me who and what to be. Not trying to be like everybody. Time to play and make believe.
Terrible theme song. If you listen to our bonus content, I've already ranted about how terrible the song is.
Yes, because this is the song that he came out to. Spoiler alert: if you have not listened to the Samoa Joe versus William Regal UPW oddball match review that we have on the Patreon feed, Triple H and this bad music makes an appearance on that show. I did want to just briefly mention before Stephanie comes out, Vince, after that video plays, he does say, quote, "Sometimes I am so proud of myself."
Stephanie calls him sick. You have a diseased heart.
An
Way
oddly clinical diagnosis.
Yeah, the way you treated her is revolting. You're just a mean old bastard. And then we get Bulging Eyes by Vince McMahon. And Vince...
We get the big gulp as well, which was so pronounced it could have been sponsored by 7-Eleven.
Vince didn't want to marry her. He had to marry her so your brother Shane wouldn't have been a bastard.
When you say marry her, you're talking about Linda, not Stephanie. But given some of the angles they ran or teased running,
True.
You could be mistaken for thinking that he was talking about his daughter here.
Yes, he was referencing his night with Linda in the Impala. Now, Kurt Angle's music hits. Kurt is the WWF champion at this point and is Stephanie's business partner.
Yes, and JR is hinting that they are more than just business partners, and this would eventually play out in the Triple H, Kurt Angle, Stephanie saga. But yeah, Kurt Angle here. Quick fashion report for Kurt Angle.
Thank you. I have a fashion note here as well. Good.
He has hair, which is always weird when you see early Kurt Angle and he is not bald. He is wearing his tracksuit, his sort of Team USA styled tracksuit with the WWF Championship belt over the tracksuit, which I enjoyed. And he also obviously had his Olympic gold medals around his neck.
And I have noted here what a great look it is to have the championship belt around the tracksuit, like over the tracksuit with the gold medals. Awesome look for champion.
Power move.
Yep, absolutely. Kurt says, "Stephanie, I'm ashamed of you. You're disrespecting your father. Boys and girls treat their parents with honor and respect where I come from."
Yeah, so which played into the obviously Kurt Angle was a heel, but he was sort of this oblivious, disingenuous goody two shoes. And so him talking this way fit into that character very well.
Commissioner Foley makes his way out. This is still the same segment, by the way. We're still in the opening segment.
Before that, Angle does get a nice shot at the state without a city, South Carolina, as he says, "Talking to your parents like that may be acceptable in South Carolina, but it's not with me."
Foley comes in. He kicks the cane away from Vince. He says, "Your injuries are as real as your sentiment behind that video. I was disgusted by the actions that led to my friend Linda's nervous breakdown."
Which I'm just thinking of Linda McMahon and Mick Foley as friends. And I want to see a video montage of them hanging out, playing Connect 4 maybe in his office, reading books as part of like a book group. I can just imagine they just seem like such a natural pair of friendship.
Yeah, the WrestleMania in 2000, back in March of this same year of this show, They had a McMahon in every corner in the main event. And,
Do not remind me.
And Linda's representative in that match was Mick Foley. So that's where they were first aligned. But yes, I would love to see some Connect 4. Foley makes fun of Kurt, and he said he will make him defend the WWF Championship tonight.
Well, Kurt, I've got a match. You see, there's one member of the active WWF roster that you have never taken on. And this man is a tough guy. He's a badass. He's a former WWF champion. He's Vince McMahon.
Vince McMahon? He's what? Vince McMahon?
Oh, yeah, it's going to be you, and it's going to be Vince, and it's going to be right here in Greenville, South Carolina.
Wait a minute, he's going to be
Kurt versus Vince McMahon tonight. We are 23 minutes into the show at this point. This segment went so long that the next match actually had to be cut. The Benoit Jeff Hardy match that follows this had to be cut to 3 minutes and 36 seconds because this opening segment went so long.
23 minutes, as I said. And then afterwards, so they do this, right? 23 minutes of an opening segment. They go to commercial. You think, well, you get back from commercial, we're going to get some professional wrestling action here in the squared circle. Nope. We get a recap of what we just saw for 23 minutes. And then we see Stephanie McMahon and her coat getting in a limo and leaving.
Now, I do want to say here, now, while we talked about how soap opera this stuff was, Vince McMahon is a heck of a performer.
Oh, absolutely.
And the performance he has put in here from the recap we saw from the SmackDown prior to this show here, what a performer Vince McMahon is. He is just hit his stride here. He really became a character in 1997, and with the Austin angle as well, and he just the Mr. McMahon character in the year 2000. He's still a heck of a performer, but the McMahons as a television focal point has kind of run its course.
Well, it is the entire promotion is revolving around it. It's fine. Like you said, Vince is an incredible character here, and it does an unbelievable job. Like, if you're doing this sort of thing, you can't get any better than having him do it. But the fact that everything revolves around the McMahons, every main eventer is somehow tied to them. Everything that happens to a main eventer is tied to them and their own familial squabbles. By this point, it had gotten very old because it had been going on for a long time. Like you said, we're here in December. We had that WrestleMania main event, that four-way match, whatever it was, in March or April of 2000. We're here 1 week before Christmas 2000, and we're still having a variation on that feud.
Yeah, and Vince McMahon being the focal point has been the story since 1997. So you're 3 years into this, and it's, spoiler alert, it's still going to keep going.
It's like Jeff Jarrett being aggrieved in TNA.
Yes.
You can pop into pretty much any show over a long swath of years, and you're going to get that. But we finally move away briefly from that situation. We see the Hardys in the back. Matt tells Jeff, think about what the Radicals have done to us, that being the group of Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, Chris Benoit, and Perry Saturn that had just jumped from WCW to the WWF. And he tells Matt tells Jeff to take the Intercontinental title from Chris Benoit and take his pride in the process. My thought then, as we go to the ring, Chris Benoit comes out. He's wearing the Intercontinental title. And my God, is that one of the lamest belt designs I've ever seen, particularly for a championship that started with an incredible belt design.
It was the perfect belt design, and then this is the oval Intercontinental title, and
it's just so nondescript. It looks like the European title looks so much nicer than this. It looks like the lowest belt in the company if you're just going by visual presentation standards.
Now, the importance of the Radicals in their jump from WCW to WWF at that time. I mean, these were 4 of the best workers that WCW had. jumping over to WWF was such a big deal. And
Well, they were also the symbols of what WCW refused to do. These are, as you said, 4 of their most talented guys. I mean, they weren't all in their early 20s by any stretch. They were younger than the old generation that had been on top for so long, and they never got their push. And then when Benoit was going to leave, they finally put the world title on him. He beat Sid. He still left the next night. And so that was that.
And it freshened up the WWF product so much because you had so many new, fresh dream matches that you got to see on television. So just a huge jump.
It made it more interesting for me because in a lot of ways, as a longtime WCW fan, one of the last things you were still clinging to was those guys. WCW still got those guys. They're, among the best wrestlers in the world, and maybe something will finally change. When they left, the hope for a turnaround, while, in-ring did get better the last couple of months of WCW's life, I guess you could say, them leaving felt in a lot of ways like the death knell for the company for longtime fans.
Now, we talked about we've talked about how uncomfortable it is to watch a Benoit match. Go back to our review of the Royal Rumble 2003 in Season 1 to hear us go into great detail about our feelings on the subject and the topic. We're not going to do that again here, but it's available for you to hear. And because I'm sure a lot of you listening to this are dealing with the same thing when you have to watch a Chris Benoit match.
The only thing I'll say, which is I kind of repeat every time that we encounter Benoit on this show, is that up until we started this podcast, I had not watched a single Chris Benoit match since, he murdered his entire family. So yeah, that's, like you said, go back to that previous show and get our thoughts on kind of how we navigate that, as you all do as well. And we'll just sort of talk about the action as it's laid out here.
The match starts with Benoit. Now, the Intercontinental title is on the line here. We had 3 championship matches, asterisk, in this on this show.
Yeah.
So this was the first, the Intercontinental title on the line. Match starts with Benoit jumping Hardy during his entrance before the bell. Hardy battles back, hits a plancha over the top rope to the floor. Benoit's thrown back into the ring by Hardy. But Hardy takes his sweet time getting into the ring. He goes up the stairs. He's posing on the apron.
He poses on the apron and turns his back on Benoit, which seems like a terrible decision. And it was, in fact, a terrible decision. Benoit runs and knocks him to the floor. At this point, Jim Ross mentions, and I quote, Steve Regal will be wrestling Steve Austin later on tonight. And I'm wondering, this will be a deep cut for you Patreon subscribers. Was Jim Ross actually in the headset coaching the commentators on that UPW show with Regal versus Samoa Joe, where they kept saying they couldn't decide whether it was William Regal or Steve Regal? I'm wondering now.
JR, if he was coaching those terrible commentators, would have just thrown down the headset and walked away and said,
he would have quit.
No thanks.
If anything could make Jim Ross quit the business, it would have been those broadcasters. But in any event, we have a big back suplex from Benoit, stomps to the head. He hits a snap suplex, chops and forearms in the corner,
big
headbutts.
Chops. These were big chops in the corner.
And the thing we note, which, we note all the time, we noted it on the Patreon account when we talked about Dynamite Kid wrestling Tiger Mask and how similar Benoit was to Dynamite, that level of acceleration, not only precision, but just acceleration, tightly packed, is something that was, you could ascribe it to Benoit, to Dynamite Kid. As you mentioned on that Patreon podcast, Bret Hart fits into that category as well. Noteworthy here to see.
Yeah, Benoit follows it up with rolling German suplexes. Benoit at the top rope, nails the diving headbutt, a kick out at 2. Jeff gets some offense in with a mule kick, and he goes off the top rope, a twisting dive to take Benoit down.
The whisper in the wind only gets a 2. It's funny, just going back briefly to the top rope headbutt, that only getting 2. You kind of forget that, guys went from one company to the other. Their finisher might not be their finisher. I think of, in more recent years, AJ Styles going to the WWE and people kicking out of the Styles Clash, but not kicking out of a springboard top rope forearm. That's what this felt like a little bit here, with the top rope headbutt just being a casual 2 count.
Yeah, Hardy goes for a neck breaker, but Benoit counters after both men. So Benoit's countering by kind of grabbing his hands and trying to power out of this neck breaker, and both men are vying for position back to back, and they're pulling each other's arms, and then Benoit gets the advantage by leaning forward, flipping Hardy over his back, then takes him down into the crossface. This was a really creative transition into the crossface. Hardy taps immediately. Your winner and still Intercontinental Champion, Chris Benoit. In the back, Kurt Angle meets with Vince McMahon. Vince gets excited, thinking about becoming a 2-time champion.
Just want to briefly go back to that match. As you mentioned with Benoit, that immediate tap out from Jeff Hardy, I was not expecting that. Here, still, Jeff Hardy was a tag team guy, but it took longer for him to be flipped over by Benoit and gotten into the crossface than it actually took for him to tap out. When you said immediate, you were not exaggerating. That was an immediate tap out. He also, one other thing, and this is a note that then follows throughout the show. Jim Ross says that Chris Benoit will be in Charlotte tomorrow night. He doesn't say, I don't know if that's because maybe that was going to be a SmackDown taping, house show. It was weird because I had no recollection of them pushing house shows at all at this time on Monday Night Raw, but we'll hear this throughout. It was kind of a harken back to the territory era. No graphic on the screen, but I was not expecting the hard sell of an upcoming house show.
We get a commercial for Mick Foley's Christmas Chaos book. Edge and Christian are the WWF Tag Team Champions at this point. We see them backstage talking about the 80s TV show Perfect Strangers.
Yes, they were discussing who is the more perfect stranger, Larry or Belky. And I howled because that's one of those things I had forgotten existed. I hadn't thought about it for 20 years. I was a fan, I'm not going to lie, as a young child.
Who amongst us, yeah. When Kurt Angle runs up to them, Kurt says he likes you. Kurt's like, you need to go talk to Mick. He likes you. Use your Canadian charm and get him to change this match. He does not want to wrestle Vince McMahon later.
The most noteworthy thing about this segment was that Edge and Christian, as the WWF Tag Team Champions, were wearing the classic WWF Tag Team title belt design. That made me very happy, particularly after seeing that hideous Intercontinental title earlier.
We get an update on Chyna's condition. We see that last week Val Venus attacked Chyna with a spike pile driver. She was carted out on a stretcher. We see footage of Chyna getting an MRI.
Yes, this was the Right to Censor group, which is a play on the Parents Television Council that was
Correct,
boycotting the
PTC.
WWF at the time.
Yeah, so they would call them the RTC to poke fun at the PTC. They were in litigation with the Parents Television Council at the time, so this was how they take out their frustrations on the PTC.
They really went all out with that group too, with such luminaries as Val Venus, Ivory, Bull Buchanan, The Good Father, and Steven Richards.
Yeah, we'll get there. They'll be in action in a little bit here. Michael Cole interviews Billy Gunn.
Okay, he does, but I don't care about that. We talk Fashion Report here on this show. That's a hallmark of this podcast if you've been listening or if you're a new listener, because as we go through time and space and just professional wrestling in general, we get some interesting looks. Michael Cole, he has the frosted tips haircut. He is wearing a denim long sleeve WWF Attitude shirt. Just blue denim. Top button unbuttoned, black tie. This look is like when an 8-year-old dresses up to go to like a retirement party for their grandpa. This is what they wear.
Yes, we're so proud of him because he dressed himself tonight.
Exactly, exactly. He put the tie with the denim. He did highlights himself in his hair. Like, just so proud of the little boy.
Okay, so he's interviewing Billy Gunn. he says that the right to censor members are going bye-bye. This was a terrible promo.
This is terrible. He was the one Billy Gunn. This is when they tried to make Billy Gunn a singles star. Spoiler alert, it didn't work.
Didn't work. Edge and Christian playing kazoos meet with Foley and Deborah. Edge says, Beauty and the Beast, no offense, Deborah, and then high fives all around. This was...
and we have a great forced chuckle.
They're being silly with Mick here as buddies and chumming around, and then they ask him to call off the match. And they try to make some good cases. They say there's boys in the back that will be mad about getting passed over for the title shot in favor of Vince McMahon. Foley says, now everyone's pretty excited to see this, and they ask him to call it off, and they get more serious each time, and Foley says no. Edge then flips over Foley's table in his office.
A card table that had his Connect 4 game, other assorted things scattered. This was his makeshift office, which was like a caged off small section of the loading dock area here in the Bilo Center in the city that not be named, South Carolina.
Yeah, so Foley has had enough of this at this point and says, you're going to defend the tag team championship against the Undertaker and The Rock later tonight.
Yeah, I was not expecting those two names to come out when he said who they would be defending the tag titles against. So that would be a happening later here on this show. We then go back to the ring, and those crazy like airstrike missile attack fireworks for the Dudleys go off. I had forgotten about that. And here come, as I wrote, the WWF Dudleys in their military fatigues. So they make their way down the ring. And then the next thing that happens is the one Billy Gunn comes out. This terrible gimmick, terrible music, just horrendous music. And at this point, JR says that the one Billy Gunn will be in Charlotte tomorrow too. And I'm thinking, are you trying to get people not to go now? Like, did you oversell on accident? Now you're trying to, it's not helping. But as bad as his music is, the next thing that happens is even more annoying, as the right to censor's music is literally like a repeating game show buzzer siren.
Yes, yeah, that's just a horrible. Usually, guys splice in horrible theme songs here, but this one is just too annoying. You're not going to get the right to censor song.
It's like if a cartoon character pushes the red button that they're not supposed to push. Like, I think there's a Ren and Stimpy episode. It's like push the red button, and like you finally did. This is the sound that would go off when you did that.
Yeah, and the right to censor members wrestling in this match would be Bull Buchanan, B squared, as we love to call him, Val Venus, and the Good Father, formerly the Godfather. So
formerly Papa Shango as well. Always have to get that in there. Formerly the Soul Taker in Global Wrestling.
So Billy,
formerly Kama, this I got to get in as well. Kama Mustafa.
We will be here all night if we have to run through all of his gimmicks. Billy and the Dudleys, they fight on the ramp. In the ring, the Good Father works over Bubba. Bubba makes his own comeback, knocks the RTC members off the apron, slams the Good Father and Devon off the top with the "was up" headbutt below the belt spot. Bubba says, Devon, get the tables, and the place goes berserk for this.
Yeah, you forget, if you don't go back and watch this stuff often, how insanely over this whole act with the Dudleys was. The what's up thing, the get the tables. People were losing their minds. You had however many, 18,000 people, whatever it was, just standing, going crazy here.
Devon and Val fight on the outside, so no tables. Stevie Richards then gets into the ring to try to interfere. Bubba grabs him, allowing Ivory to come in from behind, hit Bubba with a low blow. All of this behind the referee's back, and I noticed
Teddy
that the
Long
referee. Yeah, it's Teddy Long. And we've talked about the career of Teddy Long and how this guy's been referee, manager, commissioners. He's
back to referee. It's so
career.
Weird. So weird to see him in the WWF, like in the 2000s, as a referee. After having seen him as a manager, he said all the different things, to see him go back to being a referee.
Somehow,
yeah,
somehow the year 2000 referee Teddy Long looks younger than the 1987 referee Teddy Long in
And he's also a worse referee. There are some moments on this show where he just looks completely lost. I don't know if this was early on in him resuming his refereeing duties after a long time away, but not particularly good. Speaking of not particularly good, Billy Gunn, the one, and I say it because they have to say that every single time, gets the hot tag. He's running wild. He hits a weird tilt-a-whirl slam. Everyone's in now. Billy goes for a pile driver. Ivory is in. She grabs his hair, and then Billy just like slams her in, like a huge slam from the apron in. And at this point, Steven Richards, formerly known as Stevie Richards, hits the Steven kick, as they call it, formerly known as the Stevie kick.
Yeah, big super kick, fisherman suplex by Val Venus, and the RTC win the match.
Yeah, my only note was that this just made Billy Gunn, the one, just come off like such a geek after promising that he was going to take someone out from the RTC, like the lowest level group in the entire company, and he can't even do that. So the big singles push not exactly firing on all cylinders here for the one.
Kurt apologizes to Edge and Christian because now they have to defend their tag titles, and they ignore him. We get an XFL commercial with Jesse Ventura talking about real football.
Yeah, basically just saying modern athletes suck, blah, blah, blah. Everyone's spoiled. Like, whatever. Your football league's not going to be good, so stop.
Vince and Kurt, they meet again. Vince says he loves this idea. This is going to drive Mick Foley crazy if Vince becomes the champion. He basically lays out a plan for Kurt just to lay down for him. But
and he says, I'll try not to lay it in too thick. Cover you 1, 2, 3, and that'll be that. Angle says, Vince says, you aren't in the Olympics. You're in the WWF. Angle responds and says, with all your billions, you don't have these medals or this title, and you're not getting them tonight either. So it looks like, there's starting to be some animosity here for this world heavyweight title match.
I don't get it, Vince.
It's a big deal. All you got to do is take a couple of shots. I mean, I'll try not to lay them in too hard. I mean, and I'll just cover you real quick for the 1, 2, 3. It's not,
With all due respect, sir, no freaking way. I'm not just going to lay down and give you my title. Really?
Let me remind you where you are and who you are. You're not in the Olympics. You're in the World Wrestling Federation, okay?
Yes, I know.
And who brought you here? Me, Vince McMahon, a billionaire, all right? Think about it.
Well, can I ask you a question? With all your billions, do you have these? Where are your gold medals? Huh? Where are your gold medals? That's right, you don't have any. And you're not getting these. And you're not getting my title either, Mr. McMahon.
What?
we cut to the ring. WWF Tag Team Championship on the line. Champions Edge and Christian versus challengers The Rock and The Undertaker.
Edge and Christian from Toronto, Canada, because in the WWE universe, provinces don't exist.
Biker Taker comes out to Limp Bizkit's Keep Rollin'. For my thoughts on Limp Bizkit and new metal in general, go back and listen to our review of WrestleMania 19 in season 1 of this podcast.
Yes, you'll learn all about Limp Bizkit being the WWF's favorite band. My favorite part of this whole thing of Undertaker's entrance, as Rollin' continues to happen in my ears from Limp Bizkit, is that it shows, on the graphic, it says Undertaker. Below that, there's a sub-graphic, and it says Undertaker.com. This just made me laugh because, first, what would be on Undertaker.com? I'm trying to imagine what that website would look like. And second, it's just funny because in modern times, a lot of sports leagues, wrestling companies, they'll put, like, when they put a graphic up for a player's name, they'll also put their Twitter handle. And so it's just funny to see his website there. Undertaker.com.
That's all people had. The real stars had their own websites.
Yeah, their own website. Exactly. Quick notes on the look for Taker here. He comes out on his bike, like you mentioned, the whole Biker Taker thing. He has, he still has the long hair here. He hasn't cut it short like he would a couple years later. when he gets in the ring, even before he takes his like little overshirt off, I noted that this is as heavy as I can recall seeing Taker. He's carrying a lot of weight. He
is. I don't know if he's injured and not able to train, but yeah, he's real heavy. He's real slow in here. We'll get to it when we go over the action, but he did not look great here at all. What was great, what was amazing, in fact, was the Rock coming out and the superstar reaction that you see from the fans when the Rock comes out. I was like blown away. You just don't see it nowadays.
No, and you forget that people were still getting reactions like this in 2000. You usually ascribe these sort of crazy, over the top, just people deliriously happy to see a pro wrestler. You associate that with, Hulk Hogan in the 80s in the WWF, or, the Von Erichs in World Class, Dusty Rhodes going up and down the roads of the Southeast. But The Rock here in 2000, this is as just wildly happy as I've ever seen a crowd to see a human being for any podcast that we've done so far. We are told that The Rock is, quote, one of People Magazine's 25 most intriguing people of the year. And by this crowd reaction, I find it hard to argue against that.
No, that's legit. He was really in the People Magazine list there. So Christian starts out, he attacks Rock from behind to start the match.
Immediate loud Rocky chants, which would be a theme.
Yeah, Rock takes over quickly. He throws such great punches. We've talked about it every time we watch Rock on this podcast. He throws a great punch. Edge is in. He power slam by Rock. He tags in Taker. Taker comes in, just destroys Edge, catching Edge off the middle rope in a chokeslam position, but Christian in to break it up. He's dropped by Taker. Taker beats up both Edge and Christian on his own with punches in the corner. We get that great Undertaker DDT, and The Rock tags back in.
Well, the thing I love, too, is before even that happens, like, Taker is beating down these guys, and the crowd is, like, he hits a side slam on Christian, and what does the crowd do? They're chanting, Rocky,
they want the
Rocky.
Rock back in there, yeah.
Like, the Undertaker is in there laying waste to the tag team champions, and the crowd just wants to see The Rock. That tells you how ridiculously over The Rock was at this time. My only other quick Fashion Corner note here is that upon very close inspection, Edge's tights, they're velvet. Velvet, like purplish, maroon, magenta, whatever. It's quite the look.
Spear by Edge nails The Rock, and this allows Edge and Christian to start their double teaming. We get a chin lock by Christian. The Rock's able to fight out of it with punches, and he hits Edge with a rock bottom. Both he and Edge are down. Christian and Taker both tag in the hot tag. We get a huge power slam by The Undertaker. This was all power here.
Yeah, it was like a tilt-a-whirl into a power slam. He then throws Edge over the top rope. He goes for, his old school, as he calls it, the arm wringer into the rope walk clubbing blow. And I just note how it's wild to see all the flash bulbs going off. This is pre-cell phone. And so you just see thousands of people taking pictures as The Undertaker walks the ropes.
Taker clotheslines Christian over the top rope. Rock slams Edge face first into the announce table. On the bounce back, Edge hits the referee, and he takes a bump. The Rock, then he gets posted by Edge. In the ring, Taker has Christian up for the last ride powerbomb, nails it, gets a visual pin, but no referee.
He kills him with this. He is so high up in the air. And this was at the point where Taker really didn't use the tombstone that much at this point. The last ride, that huge powerbomb, that was his finisher for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, and you can't understate how just murdered Christian was on that powerbomb.
But the thing that was so visually impressive about the last ride was that the guy would be like 1,000 feet in the air, and he'd slam him down with that powerbomb so hard, but it's the flattest back bump you've ever seen in your life. So it's extraordinarily safe, but looks devastating, which is the best combination in all of wrestling for any move.
So Taker gets the visual pin, no referee. Edge then nails Taker in the head with the tag team title belt. Christian goes over. He makes the cover.
Well, as he crawls over to make the cover, what happens? The crowd's chanting Rocky.
Of course.
Love that. Like, this whole thing is built for the crowd to, being rallying behind the Undertaker, thinking the Undertaker is about to get pinned. And as Christian is slowly crawling over to cover the Taker, crowd is chanting Rocky, Rocky.
So the ref is crawling back in. He counts 1, 2, and a huge kick out by Taker. I completely bought this near fall hook, line, and sinker.
Me too.
I thought it was this was okay. We saw the visual pin earlier for Taker, the belt shot, and they steal the victory here. But no, this huge kick out. I bought it. The place goes absolutely nuts. Rock's on the apron. He's demanding a tag.
Yeah, he's like yelling across to Edge, who's also on the apron. Edge is yelling back at him as each partner is going, to try to make the tag.
Edge is in. He jumps on Taker's back for a sleeper, but Taker just drops back, and he's able to make the tag. Rock comes in, goes absolutely running wild, spine buster, hits the people's elbow, and the people, we say they went insane, but this people's elbow,
it was another level from where they were earlier, which didn't seem possible.
Yeah, they were all on their feet. They're jumping up and down in pure just euphoria at this point. They're going
people are
nuts.
Hugging each other, leaping in the air, screaming, yelling, high-fiving for this people's elbow. It is incredible to see this, to watch this. And as you're watching this, just focus on what you're hearing and just look around at the crowd.
So The Rock hits the people's elbow. He goes for the cover, gets a 3 count, new tag team champions.
Sports entertainment. Oh, people down low. The Rock from with the Edge is hard. Wait. They did it. He did it.
Here are your winners and the new World Wrestling Federation Tag Team Champions, The Undertaker and The Rock.
The Undertaker and The Rock just went to the tag champions.
I did not expect a tag title change here whatsoever. I have no memory of these guys being tag team champions. This match went 8 minutes and 40 seconds, and the crowd just made this something special.
Yeah, this was super fun. This was, like you said, 8 minutes and 40 seconds. As far as the competitors involved, it's a pay-per-view level match, but obviously it's shorter. It was a great TV match, and it was almost, like you said, entirely because of the crowd reaction, the star power of The Rock in particular. Just made this such a fun watch. We did get a very weird line from JR where he says, and this isn't an exact quote, I went back and listened to it 3 times to make sure I had this transcribed correctly. The Undertaker and The Rock just went through the tag team champions like X-Lax through a widowed woman.
I couldn't make out what he said there. So I was trying to figure that out too.
What? What does that even mean?
The King and JR then talk about a shoe called Lugs. I have no memory of this shoe.
And they don't, Lug's a longtime sponsor of the WWE, but it was one of those things where the only time you ever saw those shoes was on WWE programming as a sponsor. Lugs, L-U-G-Z, because I guess that makes it more extreme.
Similar to the time you would see Ruse only on WCW TV back in the 80s.
Yes, including that brief period of time where Ruse was actually on the turnbuckle pads. But they actually, this isn't just like a Monday Night Raw presented by Lugs, graphic. They are sitting at the booth. Jerry Lawler pulls out a physical pair of shoes out of the box and is holding them up. He's looking at them. He's showing JR. JR is like, oh, that's the Sooners colors. And I'm thinking, they need Don West here is what they need. Don West could sell these shoes. That's his background. It was just a few years too early in the wrestling business for him to be in a segment like this.
Vince is with Foley and Deborah in the back. He says he will become champion, and he thanks Mick by slapping him in the face. After a commercial, we get more Vince. This time he's flexing in the mirror. Then we see Y2J's countdown. Chris Jericho.
He's flexing in the
comes out.
mirror, and he says, as we leave this segment, he's posing in the mirror, and he says to himself, "You ain't ready for that, baby."
Chris Jericho comes out. His opponent, Perry Saturn of the Radicals, who was apparently managed by Terry Runnels. I have no memory of a Terry Runnels Perry Saturn romance.
No, this was a whole thing where they put Terry with the Radicals because they thought they had to do something because they were just really good wrestlers. I'll have more on that later because there's some other storyline that they reference, which I have no recollection of. But yes, Perry Saturn. My note on his look is that his knee pads and the green part of his tights, they glow in the dark.
Terry grabs Jericho's foot, allowing Saturn to get an advantage. Full Nelson release suplex by Saturn. Jericho hits a flying forearm, and he's sent into the ropes, and he goes to jump off the middle rope, going for his lion salt, and he does not make it over. He's straight up and down. Saturn catches him, and it looks like almost a suplex or brainbuster position, and then they just collapse. Here. This was terrifying.
Yeah, he basically... So part of the problem here is that he goes for the lion salt, but it's with Saturn standing. Usually when he does his lion salt, which is, an acai moonsault, when he does that, his opponent is on the mat. And if you watch, whenever Chris Jericho does it, it's not a moonsault where he gets great height. He covers great distance. So when you have a standing opponent who's relatively near him and his style of moonsault is more distance than height, this is what you end up with. He gets halfway through the rotation. He is literally vertical in the air, feet pointing towards the heavens and head pointing towards the ground. And he lands on Perry Saturn, and they just stick together, and time stops. And like you said, Saturn is holding him in kind of this like reverse brainbuster position just so that Jericho doesn't die. They kind of collapse to the mat, and Jim Ross is all of us here, and he says, "I don't know what that was."
Me neither. Jericho
Perry Saturn saved Chris Jericho's life here this evening.
He absolutely did. Jericho comes back, does a reversal into the walls of Jericho, and Saturn taps out. Jericho wins quickly by submission. Terry's in the ring. Jericho puts her in the walls of Jericho as well. This is when Dean Malenko and Chris Benoit make the save. Death Valley Driver by Saturn, Cloverleaf by Malenko, and Benoit hits the headbutt off the top rope all onto Chris Jericho.
I was not that concerned about Chris Jericho, though, because I know that headbutt off the top only gets a 2 in the WWF. The thing that I note here, well, first is that it might sound like we're blasting through this match. That's because it was so short, which is a hallmark or a touchstone of this episode that we watched, where really intriguing matches on paper that are just way too short because so much of the show is wrapped up in everything else non-in-ring. But Jim Ross says, Dean Malenko, the man who considers himself a ladies' man.
Yeah, I don't remember that whatsoever. This sounds like something like when they tried to make Lance Storm a ladies' man as well.
Yes.
Bad ideas here.
I feel like it says everything about, and you could say a lot of bad things about WCW, but it says everything about how they viewed wrestling, that Dean Malenko was the man of 1,000 holds in WCW, just as a great wrestler. And then here in the WWF, they tried to shoehorn him as being the man who considers himself a ladies' man.
Shocking, but more Vince McMahon here. He's
you don't say.
He's oiling up his biceps with baby oil, and Trish joins him. She loves a man who takes charge. Vince then touches her hair in the creepiest fashion possible.
Yeah. Not good.
They wish each other luck in absolutely gross fashion. I was so creeped out and grossed out by this segment. Ugh.
Well, and then to just up the gross factor even more, it ends with Vince returning to applying baby oil on himself as we go to commercials. So two things exist side by side. Vince McMahon is an incredible performer, and we see that here throughout this show. But this entire show is just Vince McMahon writing a love letter to himself.
It is Vince McMahon flexing with a sleeveless shirt on. He's oiling his arms constantly. This is just like it's a love letter to Vince's biceps. That's what this shows.
Yes. It is a literal and figurative flex.
After commercial, the acolytes, Bradshaw and Farouk, are drinking beer and smoking cigars in the back. Jackie's there. She wants a beer and a cigar too. She says she's going to take care of Trish tonight. Now we're welcomed and treated to the United Kingdom's Goodwill Ambassador, William Regal, your European champion, as he comes out.
In case you're wondering, William Regal will be in Charlotte tomorrow as well. That's what they tell us.
He is taking on Stone Cold Steve Austin, and all I wrote here is yes with a bunch of exclamation points. I was so excited to see this match. Regal cuts a promo.
Steve Austin's rampant attacks on Goodwill and myself are appalling. And I am here tonight to make an example of a man who besmirches myself and you, the decent people.
Look at that expression.
Furthermore, I insist, nay, demand, that he comes down.
Well, you demand, you receive in the WWF.
Introducing his opponent from Victoria, Texas, weighing in at 200.
Get out of there, William! Look out! William Regal made the
I was very excited about this, where this was going to go.
And then what an ovation for Austin. We talked about Rock's ovation earlier. This place goes crazy again. They're not tired. They're going out of their minds for Stone Cold Steve Austin coming out.
Just think of the star power here. We're not even to the main event, and we've already seen The Rock, Undertaker, and Stone Cold Steve Austin. One quick note back on that Regal promo. I am going to find ways in my everyday life to say what Regal said here, which was, I insist, nay, demand. I'm going to find ways to work that in.
So Austin comes out. He hits the ring and just immediately attacks Regal. Doesn't get his introduction in. He's not going up on the turnbuckles and posing. He just comes right in and starts attacking Regal. Austin just beats him down. Thez press, right hands from the mount. Loud Austin chants from this crowd. Suplex by Austin. Regal kicks out, and Austin continues the beating. And we get one of my favorite moves right here where Austin just throws a thumb to the eye and then follows it up with a clothesline.
Yeah, sets up the clothesline with that thumb to the eye. It's at this point that we learn that Steve Austin will be in Chattanooga and Nashville this coming weekend. So just those are worthy. I guess those are worthy of being shouted out as town names. Finally, Regal does get the advantage. He throws Austin to the floor, but then Austin immediately starts punching him, slams his head off the table twice, but then Regal responds and posts Austin twice. He throws him back in. He's stomping and choking him in the ring. So a short-lived bit of offense here from William Regal.
Loud Austin chants again from this crowd. Regal with a slick drop toe hold to keep the advantage. Throwing in forearms. Austin's able to fight back with right hands, shoves the referee out of the way, allowing Regal to hit a low blow. We get a series of 2 counts by Regal,
which I love. I'm always a proponent of that. It's funny, though, to see that here after a low blow. Like, usually see it after, like, a big move, but he hits a low blow, and then he goes for the pin 3 or 4 times. Only gets 2. Austin fighting back pretty quickly. Series of punches, and the classic Steve Austin stomping a mud hole in his opponent in the corner.
Austin goes for the stunner. Regal shoves him off, and he knocks down referee Tim White. We see a neck breaker by Regal. We get a visual pin by Regal after a neck breaker.
Yes, this was very cool. It was one of Regal's finishers at the time. It was this cross-arm neck breaker where he crosses his opponent's arms in front of their own neck and then sort of jumps forward and throws him down with a neck breaker. Very cool. And like you said, this visual pin here, I think, was Austin giving something to, one of his allies, one of his one of his guys, one of his friends in the locker room here, and I was more than okay with seeing it.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you want to know where Regal stands in the eyes of Steve Austin in the year 2000, he let him get a visual pin on him here,
which is not a normal thing.
That's not at all.
Austin wasn't giving that out like candy.
No, so Regal he goes outside, grabs the European title belt, but Austin counters with a stunner. The ref is still down. Austin grabs the belt, and this is when the ref comes to. He sees Austin holding the belt. Regal is down, so he calls for the bell, disqualifying Austin.
Regal is great here, selling, acting like he got hit with the belt. You can just imagine William Regal's facial expressions and flailing around trying to convince the referee that he had been wronged here. It was fantastic.
Austin gives Tim White a stunner for disqualifying him. Austin grabs a few beers, throws a beer at Regal on the ramp, pours some beer on the down Tim White. He drinks in the ring, and the people love every second of this. Just an awesome segment.
I loved every second of this. Again, I'd love to see Austin and Regal go longer, but I know what Monday Night Raw is. So given that, super fun to see them interact. The thing that was not super fun about this was Steve Austin having some weird nu metal screaming, singing over his music. What the hell was that? I have no recollection of this.
No,
terrible.
This was a different version of his theme song. I think it was
unacceptable.
I think it was the band Disturbed did a version of his theme song.
I was Disturbed, so
one
it's
of the
accurate.
WWF albums. Yeah, this was not a good theme song either. After commercial, Angle is with Edge and Christian in the locker room. The main focus now is I don't want to lose my title too, says Kurt.
Yeah, he's not concerned at all that these guys lost the tag titles because of him. He's just he thinks that they're just going to be all ready to help him. It's not going to bother him at all. Classic Kurt Angle.
No, Kurt Angle with Edge and Christian, always great chemistry. We saw it here as well. Edge and Christian are mad at Angle for being selfish, so they just leave him there. We now, in the ring, we have TNA, which is Test and Elbert, along with Trish Stratus.
Which means we're going to be getting Horny Lawler, which I was not looking forward to here on the show. We haven't said a whole lot about the commentary because for the most part it was fine. It was Jim Ross being 2000 Jim Ross, Jerry Lawler being 2000 Jerry Lawler. Not adding a lot, but not taking away a lot. So I guess we can be thankful for that.
Yeah, their opponents are the Acolytes, but on their way to transitioning to the APA, but still called the Acolytes here. JBL, Bradshaw, and Farouk, Ron Simmons. And their partner is Jackie. And so the Acolytes and TNA brawl on the outside. Jackie spears Trish, beats her down on the inside. And nobody takes a beating like Trish Stratus. She's just ramming her head against the mat. Looked brutal. Tess trips Jackie from the outside to give Trish the advantage. Jackie with a roll-up on Trish for a long 2 count.
Yeah, this was a visual pin where the ref was there and just didn't count 3, but it just, again, I talked about time stopping with that lion salt. Here, time stood still. I don't know what was going on with Teddy Long, why Trish didn't kick out. And then we had some awkwardness with the double tag. Teddy Long was this was not his best night in the stripes.
No, the ref, Jackie gets a tag, ref doesn't see it. APA and TNA brawl on the outside. Jackie with a DDT and gets the pin. Okay.
Yeah, float over DDT. That was it. It was quick, not very good. The only thing I noted or really cared about in here was what version of Albert were we getting? A-Train, Albert. This was
the hip hop hippo.
Yeah, this was not the hip hop hippo. This was the leather pants. He had the black sleeveless shirt. This was not showing all of the body hair Albert. This was pre-tattoo Albert. Sadly, he did not get to hit his finisher, so we didn't know whether it was the Albert bomb,
the Baldo bomb,
the Baldo bomb, the A-Train bomb, or the derailleur. Have to wait another day to find that out.
Kurt meets with Foley. He asks Foley to call it off. Kurt is serious and he's mad at this point. Cole interviews Vince on his way to the ring because we hadn't seen Vince in 30 seconds, so he needed to remind us that he's got big arms and it's the holiday season. Royal Rumble replay was Jake the Snake Roberts at Royal Rumble 96 throwing a snake on Lawler.
Lawler was not happy that they showed that, which is amusing. Then we go to the ring. Lillian Garcia is about to introduce the main event, but no, Mick Foley comes out because we also haven't seen enough Mick Foley tonight. He says, I know this match means a lot to you in your home state, but says that it calls for a special guest ring announcer, me. So I don't know. That didn't make Mick Foley seem like the greatest baby face in the world.
You didn't have to tell us that she's from, this is her hometown.
Yeah, like you're only doing that if like she wasn't scheduled to ring announce. You brought her out and said, because you're in your hometown, you get to ring announce. Instead, it's like, because you're in your hometown, you don't get to do your job. So that was weird. He then goes on to introduce each of the guys. He introduces Kurt Angle and like he's making fun of him. He says he has a receding hairline. He pokes fun at Angle, accidentally saying that he may want to be Mick Foley's wife earlier. He says a few other things, and like the crowd is not reacting to this at all, which is weird. Jerry Lawler says, "What a rotten ring announcer," and I actually agree. I would have taken Tori Wilson from that SmackDown episode was a better ring announcer here. She was not good.
Foley introduces Vince, and he had some good lines here for Vince.
Our next principal is a complete and total idiot, is how he starts the ring introduction. That got a reaction from the crowd and from me on my couch.
Our next principal is a complete and total idiot.
What? You can't talk about Vince.
He is the owner of the WWF.
The billionaire.
With a net worth rumored to have more zeros in it than an Angle family reunion.
Listen to this guy. Double slam.
He is a horrible father, a terrible husband, and a few short weeks ago, he was the recipient of a Stone Cold Stunner.
Oh, boy. Cheap pops.
A rock bottom. He went for the last ride. And he also received Mr. Sacco deep down into his gullet.
And that caused his wife, Linda, to have a
Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, the owner of the WWF, Vincent K. McMahon.
Foley moves over to commentary with King and JR. Intense stare down to start the match between Vince and Kurt. Vince then turns and yells at Foley. Vince then takes down Kurt Angle from behind, screaming that he gets 2 points and bails out of the ring to grab a microphone. You just saw Vince McMahon take down and score 2 points on an Olympic gold medalist, and then he says it was easy.
Yeah, he says, I had no idea it would be that easy. And the whole way this happens is Vince is pointing at Foley at the broadcast table, and he says, you're the reason. So then Angle walks over and points to Foley and starts saying the same thing, turning his back to Vince. That's when Vince takes the opportunity to score 2 points of that amateur takedown.
So Vince took down an Olympic gold medalist. Vince, I believe, he defeated Ken Shamrock in an octagon, and I believe he
was also an ECW world champion, so he got to have his adult wrestling fantasy camp over the course of his brief in-ring career. Good for him, I guess.
So then he turns and just starts beating down Foley with the microphone at ringside.
Yeah, this was shocking. I did not expect this. It's obvious looking back that that's what the setup was. But he's standing there talking, cutting this promo on Angle, and then just mid-promo, he turns and waffles Foley with the microphone over and over again to the point to where the mic is still turned on, and you can hear Foley like grunting, selling as he's getting hit.
Angle then jumps out and he beats up Foley also. Angle throws Foley into the ring, and he fights back. He almost wipes out Hebner when he goes to hit the ropes.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. They almost had an inadvertent squishing of Earl Hebner here, a ref bump that didn't happen but almost did.
Foley beats down Vince, but Angle hits him from behind. Low blow by Foley. He pulls out the sock, puts the mandible claw on Vince. but then a steel chair by Angle to the back of Foley's head.
Yeah, it's basically like, I think it was his back, and it was the idea that, well, we can't hit Foley in the head with a chair, maybe,
Right.
but we can't do that. But what we can sure as hell do is hit him as hard as a human being has ever been hit in the back with a chair, and so that's what happens here.
Edge and Christian come out with chairs, and they hit the double chair sandwich shot, the concerto on Foley.
Very safely by concerto standards. Like the camera shot, they tried to switch it as it happened, but they basically clapped chairs over Foley's head, and I'm assuming it was the ringing in his ears that took him down.
Stephanie runs out yelling, "Stop it!" And we see Foley. He's bleeding everywhere after the chair shot.
Stephanie is not particularly great here on the mic. She says, "Stop beating up on Mick Foley. I hope you are all right, because I have something that will change your life forever." And that's about the level at which she says it.
Yeah, she says, "These papers state that since CEO Linda is mentally incompetent, the board has granted the CEO powers to Vince, my dad." And then,
"Congrats, Daddy. It's official," she says. Vince then says, "That's my baby girl." And they hug, and we're off to the races here
Vince
with
says,
more McMahon family fun.
yeah, Vince says, "Sorry, Linda, business is business. I have complete authority. Mr. McMahon is back." And he says, "It's my duty to inform Mick Foley that his services are no longer required."
In other words, Mick Foley, you bleeding hunk of adipose tissue, you're fired.
He then says something, I don't know what this means. I didn't take the time to look it up. He says, "You bleeding hunk of adipose tissue?"
Yeah.
I don't know.
Foley gets nailed in the head with a chair shot by Angle.
So I guess they can do that, which is troubling.
Handshakes all around. Vince is thrilled. He says, "One more thing, Mick Foley, Merry Christmas." As Vince and Stephanie hug, Mick Foley's a bloody mess, and the show
bloody,
goes off the air.
Hanging over the bottom rope, bleeding profusely. A great Mick Foley bloody and messed up camera shot. And yeah, that's the show.
Yeah, Foley was taking time off for the birth of his third child, so that's why they were doing this injury angle to get him off TV for a while. So that was our first Raw show, and this was it was heavy McMahon's, parachuting in. It's fun to watch Vince be Vince for an episode. I couldn't, but I can remember, I didn't remember a lot from this show, but I can remember the feeling of just like every week, twice a week, if you were watching SmackDown and Raw, it's just so much. It's so much McMahon's on every show.
Everything, as we mentioned earlier, everything revolves around that. And then the few things that don't, they get maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Like they're just afterthoughts, buffers till the next time you see Vince or Stephanie or, at certain points, Linda. So yeah, this, I didn't mind parachuting in, but you said it perfectly. It gave you that feeling of what watching the shows at that time were like. As far as best thing on this show,
what's your favorite thing? Yeah.
Hands down, it's the Rock, Undertaker, Edge and Christian match, just because of the crowd reaction to the Rock. And I am not a Rock guy. I've come to many, many years later appreciate him. I'm the person that found the Rock incredibly grating and annoying and just was not a fan of him the first time around. But going back and watching stuff here again, parachuting in, it was just so cool to see somebody that over in front of that big of a crowd, in a match like that. I guess the honorary mention would be the Austin Regal, just for the same reasons, just to see Austin being Austin and see and hear the crowd reaction to him.
Yeah, I'm going to agree that my favorite thing was that tag title match. The total suckering me in on the near fall. I totally bid on it. And then was completely shocked by an actual a title change there from a random thrown together team. I was totally surprised, enjoyed every single minute of it, and that crowd was absolutely bonkers for The Rock. You couldn't help but just be so excited for everything that was going on. I also loved the Steve Austin Regal confrontation. I wish that was longer, but watching Austin do his thing is always fun, and watching him have fun with his friends, you could feel how much fun they were having there. And the performance by Vince McMahon, being Vince McMahon, is top notch. Just it's a special thing. I just wish we. There's a reason you don't want to have birthday cake every day, because too much of a good thing is too much, and by the end of the show there was too much there. But
yeah, exactly. I had a Vince McMahon cavity by the end of this show. He was a great performer, but it was one of my by the end it was too much. That would be one of my least favorite things on the show. But I think for me, the worst thing on this show was just the one Billy Gunn. As lame as it gets in every conceivable way.
That was lame. The whole anything that's RTC, the right to censor, this whole thing is lame. Did not care for that one bit. And just how much of these interview segments just had to cut away from the wrestling. I mean, 3 minutes of Benoit and Jeff Hardy. Because that opening segment went so long, not necessary. Could have been better.
Yeah, so. The wrestling outside of the tag title match, which that was even short at 8 minutes, but outside of that, the actual wrestling on the show was a complete afterthought. As much as anything that we've seen, I'd say more than any show that we've seen on this podcast, the wrestling just served again to just break up the long Vince segments.
Yeah, but definitely fun to jump in and watch a 2-hour Monday Night Raw. Absolutely.
For sure. Stars on a wrestling show is always fun.
And yeah, you just, it just feels like a long time since you've seen superstars like The Rock and Stone Cold and The Undertaker. These guys are a different level from for the John Cena has had those moments, I guess, but really it's been decades since you've seen people at that level. And there was a big gap between those guys and, some of those guys from the 80s you mentioned. So
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, fun to parachute in, and I don't need it every week, but I'm glad that we watched it and saw those reactions.
Yeah, and with that, we're going to wrap it up. So like I mentioned at the top of the show, make sure you're subscribed to this podcast. You can support the show via our Patreon. If you can't support us financially, that's okay too. In these times, we understand. You can support the show by telling your wrestling fan friends about us. Show them how to subscribe to a podcast. Tell your friends that used to be wrestling fans about us, and show them how to subscribe to the podcast.
And tell your former friends as well. Maybe there's an Edge and Christian Kurt Angle type of situation with your friendship. I didn't have high hopes watching this show that Edge and Christian and Kurt Angle would mend their friendship, and I don't think this show will either, but it'll get downloads for us, so please pass it along.
And with that, we're going to wrap it up. Again, all the links, the entire back catalog, everything we mentioned is available, wrestlingatrandom.com. And Adam, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. My only hope from this show was that the fine folks of Greenville, South Carolina, with their great crowd reactions on this show, that they proved to Vince McMahon that they were worthy of being mentioned as Greenville, South Carolina, the next time Raw came to town.
I want to thank everyone for listening. We'll talk to you again next time.